remember, as a part of our rookie school's 2 weeks when you become a new judge, as a part of the circuit court judges rookie school, we actually tour a Department of Corrections facility. And I remember riding on the bus with 22 other newly elected circuit court judges and the head probation officer from each of our jurisdictions. And I broke down because I saw the barbed wire. And for so much of my life, I tried to make decisions to keep myself from being behind those barbed wires again, And it just made me think about him. It made me think, in this moment, I am on this little bus going behind these barbed wires, but I'm a newly elected circuit court judge. And I really credit my cousin Mike. for the influence that he had on me and so many of my other cousins, because sometimes you don't have to be the person to make the mistake. You can live and learn through others' mistakes.
What up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Unscripted Order Podcast. I'm B. Smalls.
Yes, indeed. And I'm D. Bugg. Welcome back.
Yes. Good to be back for episode number 7. Number 7. We are excited about this episode. I mean, is there ever an episode that we're not excited about? I mean, we probably wouldn't be doing it if we weren't excited about them, right?
They all are highly anticipated on our end, but I think this is as usual, we anticipate. But I think this is a good episode that folks will like, because of what we'll be talking about.
Absolutely. So, episode 6, y'all seem to like the top 5 episode. It was some
a lot of banter in the comments.
Lot of banter in the comments.
We were aiming for peace and tranquility. I say peace and tranquility in the comments. Peace and tranquility in the comments.
Yeah, but you got some folks that
people feel strongly about their top 5s and what should and should not be there. And what we might have missed. So that's always good discussion. Discussion.
No, it is. But look, we appreciate y'all, all the support that y'all been showing to us on the podcast and the love y'all been showing us. So if you wouldn't mind, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Definitely follow us on Instagram. And then also you can find us on Spotify. Apple Podcasts is another avenue where you can find us. So that being said, if you're on those platforms, definitely leave us 5-star reviews. That will help, with all the algorithm stuff out there. And so we're excited about things to come, and we'll have maybe an announcement towards the end of this particular podcast. Indeed. So stay tuned. Stay tuned to the end. But yeah, excited about this, D-Bug.
Yeah. And as always, because this is a legal related podcast, we have to give you the disclaimer, no small print here. Because we talk about the law and legal related issues, we have to let you know that nothing we say here is intended to create any type of attorney-client privilege, attorney-client relationship, or we're giving you legal advice. This is strictly for informational purposes. If you do have a legal question, we strongly suggest that you reach out to an attorney that practices that type of law in your area. As always, this is just for informational, educational purposes.
That's it. Nothing more, nothing less.
That's it.
All right. Well, again, excited about this episode. This particular episode is going to be about the influencers. This is not, the Kim Kardashians, the social media, the social influencers. But these are the people who have influenced the two of us. That have played a significant role in our lives in different areas that have really, kind of helped us along the way to really, maybe believed in us where maybe we didn't believe in ourselves. And they saw something in us that maybe sparked something that gave us confidence to be able to, to advance in life. So let's start on the academic side of things. So, D-Bug, I'm going to let you start off, from an academic side of things. You know, I mean, you can start in kindergarten and go work your way on up if you want to. So.
And I do. I start. Okay. I literally start there early, but I have to, preface it with when you really sit down and think about it, the influencers. This episode could be 3 days long if I could name all of the people that truly influenced me. So I don't want anyone to feel slighted, but this is, kind of those folks that really stand out. The folks that. Through the course of things that I've gone back to their wisdom, guidance, or the motivation that they provided, or the example that they provided as I've gone along and passed along some of the gems they gave to me to other people. So I always have to preface it with that, but it does go back to my first grade teacher, Mr. Carlton Ashby. Mr. Ashby.
Okay, Mr. Ashby. I know Mr. Ashby.
Yeah, Mr. Ashby was on the school board down.
He was on the school board.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So my first grade teacher, first black male teacher that I had, first kind of, if you see it, you can achieve it type situation where, and I don't know if I had another, aside from perhaps a coach, but a classroom teacher. I don't know that I had many other actual black male classroom teachers until perhaps high school after Mr. Ashby. But he's always stuck in my mind as the first influencer, who always, I think when you're younger, you don't really get it, but someone that is trying to make sure that you are not running with the wrong crowd, making sure that you're taking care of what you need to take care of, and quite frankly, not doing anything to embarrass your family, because he had a direct line to my mom. So,
yes, sir.
If Dante was acting up or if Dante was talking too much, it was known at home pretty quickly. But when we first, exchanged messages about talking about influencers, and especially academic influencers, Mr. Ashby, I think it's Dr. Carlton Ashby now, was the first name that popped to mind. So I'd be remiss if I did not start my list of influencers with Dr. Ashby, my first grade teacher. Next one I have to say is Miss Kingwood. She was my 8th grade teacher at Newsom Park. And you talk about somebody seeing something in you that perhaps you don't see in yourself. And she introduced me to this thing called being a page in the House of Delegates. I had never heard of what being a page was. And, she suggested that I apply. She told me what the program was all about. I got a chance to meet my delegate at the time, Delegate Flora Crittenden, who selected me to be her page in 1994. And it was a wonderful experience. And, we talked about our 757 episode and how, growing up, sometimes you didn't leave your area of the city. That experience was the first time I lived away from home, lived in the city of Richmond. We would go to Richmond Monday through Friday and come back home on the weekends, do Saturday school on the weekends to keep up with our academics. But it was, I think there were 40 pages for the House of Delegates, perhaps throughout the state, maybe more than that. Maybe it was 100. I think each delegate may have a page. But just being around other students throughout the state, it was that first exposure of there are kids my age that live life totally different than what we're getting in the East End of Newport News, different cultures. It was such an eye-opening experience, and really that first kind of eye-opener into how our laws are made, how state and local government works. So Miss Kingwood definitely put that on my plate. She put that in front of me. I had no idea what it was before she mentioned that. So God bless her. May she rest easy. But Miss Kingwood is definitely an academic influencer for me. And I know so many other people from Newport News as well. The next one is Betty Sharp, my chemistry teacher from Heritage. Another person that, saw potential in me, perhaps when I was trying to not display it or not even see it in myself. I remember her kind of grabbing me one day, like, pull your pants up, boy. Yeah. Pull your pants up. You don't need to be walking around looking like that. You're too smart for that, and she really sparked my interest in chemistry. A lot of people don't know. I started school as a chemical engineering major at Maryland. That's when I wanted to major in. I had a little snafu with reading the syllabus and some automatic failures and chemistry because I missed too many labs. I think I might have told that story, but Miss Sharp, she really sparked my interest in chemistry. I used to walk around with the periodic table of the elements in my wallet.
Wow.
And Miss Sharp, she took an interest in me that I was always appreciative of because it really kind of kept me on the right path, especially when it came to putting in the time and energy into my academics. I for a long time, I was able to get by just by showing up to class, paying attention, and didn't have to really study or do anything to try to set myself aside from anyone else. So, got to mention Miss Sharp. And the last one in terms of academics that I would mention is my professor from law school, Professor Jonathan Stubbs. You'd have to meet Professor Stubbs to understand like just how awesome this man is. Very soft-spoken, just smooth guy. But I took race, religion, and the law with Professor Stubbs. And just that it was the first law school class I recall that was a different format. It wasn't so much about reading cases and pulling out the black letter law from it, but just analyzing how the law impacts people in different ways, perhaps based on their race or their religion, and how we, as social engineers, can play a part in that. So Professor Stubbs was very, very influential, especially once I got to law school and started trying to figure out what it was going to be, what role I was going to play or what career I was going to have in the law. He was very, very influential for that. When I was in private practice and practicing up here and taking cases in Newport News and Norfolk and Chesapeake and down in Richmond area, I would always stop in and try to make sure I would get a chance to see him when I was going down. So Professor Stubbs is another one I definitely have to mention. So those four, I think, are the top four that if I had to do a Mount Rushmore, right, of my academic influences through my schooling years, those would be mine. So how about you?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a little bit different approach. I will tell you my early academic career, I had some teachers that had an influence on me, but in a negative way. I had an early teacher who came out and was pretty open about the fact that when it came to African American students, black students, they just, didn't really know how to deal with them. And I can remember being essentially separated, now looking back at it, segregated, where I literally was separated from the other students in the classroom. It was primarily because I was never a bad student. Okay, when I say bad, I'm talking about like I was not, behavior-wise. That just, it wasn't who I was. Because, look, I knew Ronald and Sheila would go upside my head if I was.
Come on with a note if you want to.
Oh, man, but I did come home with notes, but it was because I was talkative. It was
join the club on that.
Oh man, that was the one comment.
Report card. Dante's a pleasure to have in class, but he needs to know when it's the appropriate time to talk.
Yeah, and so that influenced me. And I can remember having one teacher call me a manipulator. Ooh. And I can tell you this, at the time when the teacher said it, I didn't know what a manipulator was, but I knew based on tone, tenor, that it wasn't a good thing.
Yeah.
And so here I am as a 44-year-old man, remembering that when I was 10 or 11 years old, I had a teacher that called me a manipulator. And so what that taught me was that there is power in the words that we speak, so much so that it can have an influence or impact on a young person for, if not the majority of their life, for a good portion of their life. Yeah. And so, I say all that to say that, I saw what, I had negative influences, but I think it made me appreciate the positive ones. And so I can remember my third grade teacher, her name was Jean Belsick. Okay, well, she started the year off as Belsick, but she ended up getting married to a guy from Venezuela. His name was, last name was, I think it was Henredia. And so she became Miss Henredia during the school year. But I can remember where, I had, teachers that, would write the negative comments on the report card saying that I was talkative. She saw that too. That was no different in her class. Mm-hmm. But I tell you what she did. She allowed me on Fridays, okay, I think during maybe the second semester, she carved out maybe about the last 15 minutes of class on Fridays. And she would allow me to have the Brian Smalls show.
Yes, you did.
And I put on a performance. And it was
What?
honest.
This is third grade?
Third grade.
Okay.
Third grade. And it was one of those things where literally I probably was up there for maybe 10, 15 minutes just talking and, just everything that I was feeling all week, that I wanted to get out, she let me get out during that time frame. But that really had an impact on me because whereas, the other teachers, they saw it as a negative, she was like, she saw something in me.
Yeah.
They're like, this kid is creative. He's not a bad kid. He just needs an outlet. He just needs an outlet. And so, shout out to Miss Heredia for giving me that outlet to have the Brian Smalls show in third grade. And I'm sure there are probably I know for a fact that there are some of my former classmates who were in that class who probably, hadn't thought about that since third grade. But now that I'm bringing it up on the Unscripted Order Podcast, 30 some odd years later, that probably will spark a memory for them. But that, that was a major influence on me. Yeah. So shout out to Miss Heredia. Middle school, I had a couple of teachers. Miss Powler was my homeroom teacher in sixth grade. She goes to my church now. I see her now on a regular basis. And she still looks the same. She hasn't aged one bit. So shout out to Miss Powler. She was just someone who I think pushed me because she knew academically I was a strong student. And so she pushed me academically to make sure that I was doing my best. And then Miss Marilyn Taylor, she was a seventh grade teacher. Also same thing. And I remember she knew I was an athlete. And so, I remember we had an arm wrestling competition one time, and I ain't too proud to say she beat me. I think I was feeling myself a little bit too much. She kind of put me in my place. But, those were two middle school teachers that I can remember. And then in high school, I had a few teachers who really stood out. I can remember Mallory Young. Miss Young was my English teacher. Miss Watson, she was also another English teacher. She taught Advanced World Lit, I think 11th grade, if I'm not mistaken. And she just, I can remember just how she just always spoke life over me. And those, her words were always very, very powerful. And then I had a math teacher, Miss Shepard. So Miss Shepard was my calculus teacher when I was, believe in 12th grade, and her son Scott was a good friend of mine. We played basketball together. I can remember I was struggling. Like, calculus was one of those classes that academically I struggled with, and I can remember going to Miss Shepard's house and sitting at the kitchen table after basketball practice, the night before the tests, and she literally would go over the work, and we would do examples, and she didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
After school days over with, but she wanted to see me succeed.
Yeah.
And so she played a major impact on me from an academic standpoint as well. And then on the law school side of things, I had one professor who really kind of stood out. As a matter of fact, his name was Tony Alfieri, and he taught Civ Pro. And his reputation preceded him because when, the older students found out I had, Tony Alfieri as my Civ Pro teacher, they were like, ooh, good luck. But he had this, for those of you who have never been to law school before, he was big on the Socratic method. And so for those of you I know,
It's
Judge Bugg.
triggering.
It's triggering.
It's triggering.
Get that PTSD when you think about it. But in law school, what many professors do is they use the Socratic method, where basically they will call on you, they will get you to stand up, and then they will pepper you with questions until they are done. And you better be prepared, otherwise it might not go too well. You keep standing.
I had a 3-day streak in property class one hell year. Professor Berryhill. And I won't interrupt you, but go ahead.
Okay. But no, his reputation preceded himself. We had our first day of class for law school was on a Monday. We sat through our orientation session on a Thursday, and when we went by his classroom, his syllabus was posted up on the door outside of his classroom. And I can remember reading, it was like, okay, this has got to be a misprint, because the syllabus said that we had 1,100 pages to read between Thursday and Monday. I was like, there's no way that can be correct. And I'll be honest with you, I probably got through 750 of 1,100. I'm not
That's
the
fastest.
Good chunk.
Yeah, 750 is a good chunk in law school reading, though.
I'm not the
people will lie
fastest
to you
reader.
and tell you they read the whole 1,100. Most of your classmates weren't reading.
Yeah. And it wasn't case law. He had this whole thing. He did this whole 21 questions. It was the method that he taught his class. And basically, we read, there was a movie with Don Travolta, A Civil Action. It was about a water. Yeah, you remember that? Okay. Yeah. Civil Action, John Travolta. They made it to a movie. We read that book. There was The Tragedy at Buffalo Creek. We read that book. And then I think there actually was, some case law type reading as well. But long story short, I got probably about 2/3 of the reading done. And I was like, you know what? This is all I got for you. Yeah. And the very first day, first class is Civ Pro. And who does he call on first? Yours truly. The very first day of law school. Yeah. And I remember getting up, and he peppered me with some questions. I answered them, and I got to sit down. Yeah. But the one thing that he taught me was be prepared. Mm-hmm. Be prepared. And actually, it was one of the best grades that I got in law school. Was for as touch as he was as a professor, we were rewarded by being prepared. So, so shout out to Tony Alfieri, my Civ Pro professor from my first year of law school. Yeah. So from an academic standpoint, those were the people I think. And of course, look, like his, disclaimer, there were other people who played in a role, but we only got so much time. So
the academic influences that we've had, again, there are too many to name in just one episode, but those are kind of some of the highlights. But Judge Smalls, with you, I think you played football at some smaller institution. But with you being a student athlete, we can transition on over into our athletic influences, kind of the folks that influenced you and perhaps some of the lessons that you learned from those folks along the way.
Sure. Yeah. So, I was an athlete growing up. I first started playing, I think initially my first sport was softball. I played on the Blue Jays in the Williamsburg softball rec league. Yeah. Williamsburg rec league. And I can remember, the first time I went out there for a game, it was just exciting. And, I remember playing soccer one year, and my next door neighbor, one of my best friends growing up, a guy by the name of Pete Henderson. Pete and I are still friends to this day. His dad, who was kind of like a second father because they were right across the street from me, he was my soccer coach, and he coached me in baseball and coached me in flag football when I was in 4th and 5th grade. So he was one of those people I think definitely had an impact on me from a athletic standpoint. I'll never forget my first basketball coach, Coach Humphreys. And Coach Humphreys, here's the crazy thing. So he was either in high school, like he was like maybe a senior, or maybe he was like a freshman in college. He was really, really young. but he was coaching, my basketball team. And then years later, here I am as a judge, and who's, one of the higher ups in the James City County Police Department, in a leadership role, Coach Humphreys,
Yeah.
so it's amazing. I see him from time to time, different events and everything like that. So he definitely, was somebody that I remember from early on. But, my 8th grade basketball coach, Coach Oace, had a big influence on me. I will tell you that one of my high school basketball coaches, Kevin Jones, Coach Jones was, he was a believer, he was a Christian. And so where I had been used to a lot of my coaches being, cussers, that wasn't Coach Jones.
We've all had those cussing coaches, right?
we have had those cussing coaches,
Yeah.
but that wasn't him. He was, he might have said a freak, or it was his way of expressing his displeasure. But it was one of those things where what he demonstrated, what he showed me was, look, you can be who you are. You don't have to be anybody else to be successful. And so he ended up being the woman he married was also a believer, and he and his wife Deanna are the godparents for my son Brayden. And so, he both of them had a tremendous impact on me, but him specifically being my basketball coach. And then also in high school, Coach Melvin Jones. And for anybody who is from this area, Coach Jones, I mean, when you talk about a sports legend in this area of Virginia, he coached football, but man, Coach Jones was really known on the track. And the influence that he had, and some of the people, he is the coach who told Lawrence Taylor that he needed to be playing like organized football, because Lawrence Taylor apparently, I believe the story goes that he was playing like in the local rec league. Yeah. And Coach Jones just had this way. Now, boy, let me tell you, he had this voice that, now let me tell you, it was kind of raspy. But you ain't play. Look, you ain't play when it came to coach. Yeah. You talk about that teacher, the female teacher who told you to pull up your pants.
Yeah.
Coach might tell you to pull up your pants, but if you ain't listening the first time, he might go upside your head.
He'll do it for you.
He might go upside your head. He might pull them up. He might go upside your head. Coach didn't play, and people don't mess with Coach.
Yeah.
And so Coach. Coach got Lawrence Taylor playing, high school football. And of course, when Lawrence Taylor, went to the Hall of Fame, and over the course of his career, he always credited Coach Jones as one of those people who was a major influence. There were so many life lessons, so many sayings, I won't get into all of them here, but there were so many things that he did. And I can remember, when he talked about pulling up your pants and, saying yes or no, sir, and being just a decent person, a decent human being. We kind of laughed at some of the things he would say, but now looking back on it as an adult, I'm like, man, he was teaching us life lessons at that time that, quite frankly, we weren't getting from other places. And for some of the young men who he was coming into contact with, they weren't getting it at home. They weren't getting it in their, in their respective communities. So he was a father figure, a coach for many an athlete who came through this area. So he certainly is somebody that was influential. And then finally, I'll say the last person is Coach Lloyd Carr. Coach Carr was the head football coach at the University of Michigan. Shout out to Coach Carr. He was someone who, every season, all right, he would have read a book or two in the off season, and that really kind of shaped our season and the theme for that season. And it's up behind me. I'm not going to move the camera, but up above my jersey are a couple of the. He would have these things created that were usually references to something from the books that he was reading, and it was something that each member of the team got, and it was something that we would think about. We talked about it through the entire season, and so it was just amazing. And part of my love for reading came from Coach Carr, because he was a reader and he always encouraged us to read. And so, it was, so many life lessons I got from him and from the other coaches that, I dealt with over the course of my athletic career. So, but those are just a few. Again, disclaimer, there were more, but those were some of the few that really, I think, stood out to me in my athletic career. So I know I think you were an athlete.
A little bit. Used to be.
A little bit. Back in the day.
My has been now.
I know you're not a has-been.
I might be in the city's Hall of Fame, but
let them know. Let them know, D-Bug.
I'm slow now.
But that's one thing you won't back then.
Listen, I learned. I told somebody the other day, one thing I have learned is I don't accept any race challenges at all at this age. You want to race me? You should have caught me from 1996 to 2002. That's when you need to catch me. Yeah. No, but definitely in terms of athletic influences, I think the first I would have to mention is a family member. We have a lot of Elton Browns in my family.
Yes, you do.
So the first Elton Brown in the family, my cousin Elton, the older Elton, he ran track in high school. He ran for Ferguson, was a great 800-meter runner. And the first person I knew that went to college on a scholarship, a track scholarship, excuse me. So, I remember my grandmother used to have photo albums upon photo albums upon photo albums. And some of the pictures that I remember seeing most often would be pictures of him running for Ferguson and the newspaper articles of him signing with his college, and just how proud people in the city were of him and how far he took it on the track and turned that into his ticket to go to college. So that would be my first influencer, especially when it comes to track in particular. Overall, a close friend, I think I mentioned Marcellus B2 Harris. B2 and I went to school together. B2 was a couple years ahead of me, but watching his journey at Ferguson, B2 was a starting quarterback. And then Vic popped on the scene and B2 shifted seamlessly. And I don't know if it was seamless for him. I got to imagine there probably was a little bit of struggle in that. But
it had to have been.
To go from starting quarterback to playing wide receiver and making way for an underclassman, but at least from the outside, he didn't miss a step. He was all everything and went on to play at East Carolina. And, his father was my pastor at the church we went to. So just seeing his experience was very influential because, my cousin did it, in the 80s. But watching B2 do it, knowing him and seeing it on a daily basis was really, really influential, especially at that time of, being a freshman, sophomore, really trying to figure out what sports I would play, what role they would have in anything. So in terms of, thinking about sports to play, I have to mention they were my PE coaches at Ferguson, Coach Scott and Coach Tommy Reeman. Now, you say Coach Reeman's name, and everyone in the 757 knows.
Everybody knows. Coach Reeman.
And Coach Reeman, God bless his soul. Coach Reeman had this way of saying my name, and Coach Reeman always tried to convince me to play football. He'd say, "Bug, you need to get out on that football field, Bug." And in all honesty, I didn't think football was for me. Started running track first at Ferguson, but I have to mention the other influencer along with those first three in high school is Coach Scott, is Coach Reeman, and it's Coach Deron Forward. Because like most other people from our area, I thought I was going to be a superstar in either football or basketball. And quite frankly, I thought it was going to be basketball. We played, we were in Brook Ridge Apartments. We played basketball in the trash can, the big green dumpsters.
Right.
Yeah. So, if you can shoot on the dumpster or shoot on the milk crate, your jumper's pretty good. So I thought I was, good then to make the JV team at Ferguson. And I always credit Coach Ford. I tell him every time I see him, I thank him for it because, back then, and still now, you have to have a physical. I think the physical back then was $12, $14 to play sports.
Okay.
So I remember going home and asking my grandmother for the money for the physical. I get the physical because I'm going to play basketball. So I go off for the basketball team. The names come out, they posted on the wall, 14, 13 names. Dante Bugg is not one of those names, right? So
devastation.
Yeah, devastation. Like,
oh, man.
And I'm a competitive person, so I'm looking at the list like, how'd he make it? I didn't make it, bro. Right?
I know, yeah.
And there were like guys that were on JV. Shout out to my man DeMarcus McMillan. DeMarcus is down with Coach Vic now at Norfolk State. But DeMarcus had played JV the year before. Okay. And I always remember, and he probably doesn't remember this, but I blocked DeMarcus' shot in one of these tryouts. And I was like, I got to make the team now. I blocked DeMarcus' shot. It was not enough, right?
It was not enough.
But I remember, thinking, I done wasted Granny's money. Like, how do I tell her I went out for the basketball team when I'm not on the team, and I can't pay her this $14 back, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody said, well, you should come out and run track because they don't cut anybody in the track team. And I was out there the next day. I was out at track practice. Shout out to my next influencers on the list. The first one was Coach Bateman. She was the track coach when I was at Ferguson, went over to Heritage with us. It's funny because I mentioned being honored and to be in the city's Hall of Fame. We got inducted at the same time. And we told the story because, for me to be a hurdler and go to college and hurdle, when I first started running track, Coach Bateman told me I couldn't sprint because my feet were too big. Like, what size spike you wear? 12, 13? Oh, you're going to be a distance runner, right? So I started out running the half mile, the 2 mile. I mean, I was and it was a weird mix because I was a distance runner or mid-distance runner and a high jumper. It was the weirdest mix. But somebody got sick one day at an outdoor meet or didn't show up, and I got a chance to run the 4x2 and never looked back. And I was like, I told you, Coach Bateman, I'm fast. I told you. And then the other one would be Coach Ray Pollard. Coach Pollard, when I first started running track, was at Denby. I think he was at Denby for years. And he switched over to Heritage High School I'm pretty sure it was my senior year. I think he was only there 1 year. Fresh off the bat, I told you I played that lackluster year of football at Heritage my junior year. And one of the pieces of advice that he gave me is, he said, with your talent level, if you want to have track pay for your education, you don't need to waste your time on a football field and you need to run cross country. And I wasn't too excited about that, because cross country is cross country. Right? Yeah. It's a lot of running, but I did it. And it really helped, especially for somebody like myself. I was running the high hurdles, the 4x1, the 4x4, doing long jump, high jump, triple jump. It helped with my endurance at meets. And it certainly helped, I believe, get me, the college scholarship that I ended up taking at the University of Maryland. So Coach Pollard was very, very influential. Similar to what you said, one of those coaches that didn't curse a lot. I remember he cursed at us one time. And when he did, we knew he meant it. Like, we were supposed to be running something. And I remember it was supposed to be in 4.5 seconds, right? Okay. And we were running them in like 4.6, 4.7. We might have threw a 4.4 in there when he said something. He said, when I say 4.5, I mean 4.5. And you better believe the rest of them joints came in at 4.5. Coach Pollard, because he is serious, right?
Oh, man.
But great influence. And I do have to mention another track coach influence of mine who's a connection of ours. I don't think we haven't told that story on the podcast, but when we first met each other, we did realize we knew a lot of people in common. Shout out to LJ and Gator that I ran summer track with, that played football with you at Lafayette. But Coach Overton was my first summer track coach for the Freedom Striders.
Coach Allen Overton.
For the Freedom Striders, my first summer track coach. And I think Coach Jones might have popped up out there, but Coach Overton was the one with his little straw Kango hat and the khaki shorts and the leather sandals. Coach Overton was the man. But just a lot of and with all of them, Coach Bateman, Coach Pollard, Coach Overton, just coaches that really cared about their athletes. There were times if you needed a ride home for practice or a couple of dollars to catch the bus home from practice or something, they had your back, and you really felt like your coaches cared for you. And they were great influences. Even when I was in college running track, If things weren't going well or in the summertime, I would come back and try to get that wisdom, advice, and training and tutoring from Coach Pollard, Coach Bateman, some of those coaches that influenced me when I was, coming up through things. So, again, there are tons of folks, I didn't even touch on, perhaps influences from college athletics. But I think a lot of those things I learned really started, like you said, rec league, high school coaches that really poured into me along the way.
So let's transition to our last segment, and let's talk about, obviously we are where we are at this point in time in our careers, both as judges. But just like from an academic standpoint, an athletic standpoint, there were people kind of along the way that have played a role or had an impact on us. So Judge Bugg, I'm going to turn the floor over to you to talk about, who are some of those folks that played a role in you landing where you are now currently on the bench.
Yeah. The first I would have to mention is the former Dean of Admissions at Richmond Law School, Dean Michelle Rahman. And I was running track. I thought I was going to run professionally after school. I had injuries towards the end of junior year, senior year that kind of threw a wrench in that plans. And, like a lot of college graduates, you do the on-campus job fairs, and Enterprise Rent-A-Car seemed like a very... It seemed like a very great place to go work, right? The management trainee program. So I started there. Not to disparage Enterprise, but I'll just say it wasn't a job for me.
Sure.
Wasn't the job for me. But I had taken the LSAT and applied to law schools. And my first memory of Dean Rahman is I was at a happy hour for something for Enterprise, one of our area things. And I was very unhappy at that, like really contemplating, like this isn't the job for me. What am I going to do next? And I got a phone call from an 804 number, didn't recognize. I stepped out to take it. And she said it was Dean Michelle Rahman, the Dean of Admissions at the University of Richmond. And I thought it was a prank because I'd applied to multiple schools. And, you either get the letter, acceptance, or rejection. But the Dean of the Admissions of law school was calling me. I was like, this is somebody playing a joke.
Right.
It can't be.
Right.
Now, what I learned to find out that she calls every admitted student personally to let them know that they've been admitted to that school. And
really?
And when she was at Richmond, she was doing it for years. Imagine how many phone calls she made, right?
That's crazy.
You talk about a great first impression, right? I already liked the law school from my visit there. It was great to know that I had gotten in. My next memory of her was being at orientation. I think I mentioned it, in one of our episodes when she asked who's nervous, and I was the only one of 140 people in my class who raised my hand.
I remember you saying that.
But throughout my 3 years there, and since then, she's always shown a particular interest in me. She was, I can't tell you how many times during law school I went into her office and just cried. Or whatever was going on, whether I was homesick, didn't think I could make it in law school, I wasn't cut out for it, negative racial experiences that I might have experienced in school. And she was always there to listen. She always had the right words. And at every conversation, every meeting in her office ended with a hug. And it might not have changed everything in that exact moment, but man, it went a long way. It went a long way. And Dean Rahman spoke at my investiture at law school. She always tells the story of how, when I first got to law school, I think my first 2 years, I wore white T-shirts and fitted caps every day. Every day.
Yes, sir.
That was my uniform.
You was part of Dip Setter?
I was dressing like I was one of the hot boys from Cash Money. Jabot jeans, a white tee, and a fitted, right?
Not the Jabot jeans.
Yeah, but, she told the story of my investiture on how she was like, I don't think I saw Dante's eyes for the first 2 years because every day he had his hat down. And it was true. She had a conversation with me about, just not kind of feeling like I need to hide behind certain things.
Sure.
And being my authentic self and showing up and being who I am and feeling comfortable in these rooms that I was in, because Richmond's not a heavily populated school when it comes to minorities, especially the time I was there. So that was very influential for me. Since law school, even again, once I was, in private practice, I would always stop by her office. Sometimes I'd need to cry, as we're trying to figure out this lawyer running a business thing, but every conversation would end with a hug. So Dean Rahman, top of my list in terms of legal influencers that just cared about me, has always shown interest in me, opened the door for me to make it into law school, and has always been a great resource, just a great friend, great person to have in my corner at all times. So shout out to Dean Michelle Rahman. I hope she's enjoying her semi-retirement. She keeps saying she's going to retire, and then she pops up. Like, she was at William & Mary for a few and at school in Texas. Like, she just loves, helping law school students. So awesome. The other person I would mention, kind of a professor, more of an adjunct professor that taught law skills. So for, you have your kind of core classes in law school, but lawyering skills was kind of that class on how we learned how to kind of handle those specific, it's going to sound redundant, but lawyering skills. And Michael Herring, he was, I don't remember what firm he was practicing at the time when he was my adjunct professor that taught lawyering skills. But it was when we worked on courtroom stuff, actual putting on a trial. So we had a law skills weekend where we actually had class on Saturday and Sunday for what feels like 24 hours almost, but it was maybe an 8-10 hour day. But he had us doing opening statements, closing statements, cross-examination of witnesses, and had us record ourselves and actually see how we looked and how we came off in it. But when I tell you the first person I ever wanted to imitate and try to be like in a courtroom, it was Michael Herring. You talk about always prepared, knew his case front to back. His presentation was crisp, clean. He always had it together, and he's always been an influencer for me. Anytime you step into a courtroom, especially when I was in private practice, you had to look the part, you had to play the part, and you had to be ready for whatever was going to be thrown at you. And I got that from Michael Herring, just watching him. And it turns out after he was my adjunct professor for law skills, he ran for Commonwealth Attorney, became the Commonwealth Attorney in the city of Richmond, starting January 1st, 2006. And I did my third year externship, at the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, the city of Richmond. So I got to intern in his office for the first 6 months while he was Commonwealth Attorney. I got to work on some really high-profile cases that came through Richmond in 2006. I won't name the names, but you can look them up. But just watching how he approached handling those cases, how he approached handling the media, The first day he came in the office, 7 people were murdered in the city, So his first day taking over, and it was off to the races from there. So he's always been a great legal influence. I have to mention, again, God rest his soul, Murray Janis. Murray Janis was probably one of the best criminal defense attorneys in Central Virginia, in the Richmond area. I met Murray at an end of courts meeting. I had applied. I went to law school to be a sports agent, realized hey, there's no professional sports teams near the University of Richmond, so we should probably look into something else.
Direction, right?
Right. And I had applied and, sent my resume and stuff to Murray, and just randomly met him at an end of courts meeting, introduced myself, and he's like, "Oh, I just read your resume," and invited me in for an interview. And I remember walking into the interview, and at some point, the fact that I ran track at Maryland came up. Somehow my cousins that went to UVA, both named Elton, one played football, one played basketball, they came up, and Murray had gone to UVA for law school. And we talked about my cousins for 30, 40 minutes. Like, he raved about how great both Eltons were in UVA sports. And I remember walking out like, well, I didn't get that job at all. But I interned there after my 2L year in law school, started there right after law school, and just really learned, how to be a lawyer, how to answer the phone when the client first calls in, the initial client consultation, showing up in court, how to handle everything in terms of being a lawyer and running a law firm. I was with Murray my first year in practice, and, including the time I interned there. He was a great legal influencer for me. And I'd have to mention probably the most 3 influential judges that I saw on the bench when I left Murray's firm. I came to Northern Virginia to work for a domestic relations firm. And one of the first things I went to with my then boss was the investiture of Judge Nolan Dawkins in Alexandria City to circuit court. He was moving up from JDR to circuit court. Judge Dawkins, Judge William Newman, and Judge Gerald Bruce Lee, 3 black male judges that when I moved to the Northern Virginia area, I saw them in court. Each one of them they had their own unique personality, their own unique style, their own unique judicial persona. But when I tell you, all three of them were always prepared. They treated people with respect and dignity when they came into the courtroom. Even if they ruled against you or your client, your folks walked out feeling like they had been heard. And they really became the blueprint for everything that I try to do on the bench today. So even when I first met them, I had no idea that it was going to be an influence for who I would try to be and how I would build or base my judicial persona on. But when I tell you, Judge Gerald Bruce Lee, Nolan Dawkins, and William T. Newman, those three gentlemen, just everything they were on the bench, all of them are enjoying retirement now. But, even off of the bench, getting to know them and some of the words of wisdom that they would speak into me about their experience. You got to imagine these guys were, appointed to the bench in the 90s. They were practicing law in the 70s and 80s when there weren't many black men taking the bench. I would have to say those three, Judge Dawkins, Judge Newman, and Judge Lee. I hope we can have all three of them on as guests, because I think each one of them have very unique stories that are very moving and very powerful on their path to the bench and what they've done after being on the bench, quite frankly. But, each one of them in conversations, private conversations, they've dropped gems on me that I go back to very, very frequently. Judge Lee and I try to speak at least once a week, if not every other week, just to check on each other. But also, just making sure that we are doing what we need to do as we move forward. So those three I would have to mention as kind of my top three legal influences when it comes to judicial persona and how I approach the job.
That's awesome. Yeah. So for me, I've told this story before. I went to law school. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I didn't want to take the bar, let alone be a judge. Mm-hmm. So I went there really to get the degree and make myself more marketable for one of those sports jobs out there. And I was in a city that had plenty of sports teams, and yet I struck out. Trying to land an internship with those mm-hmm. Organizations. But so, law school for me, I was like, look, I'm just trying to get through this thing.
I think we all were.
Yeah. But, there were a few people that stood out, but one in particular, Marcy Cox. Marcy Cox was an assistant dean. She was the head of the Career Planning Center at the University of Miami while I was there. She was a proud graduate of the University of Southern California. And so, me being a Michigan guy, we had plenty of conversations about USC and Michigan and the games that they played over the years. She was instrumental, very influential in me landing my first summer internship, if you will, clerkship. Mm-hmm. And so that's a nice segue to talk about the judge that I work for, Judge Donald Graham of the Southern District of Florida. And, I don't know. I've got to check to see if Judge Graham is still on the bench. But Judge Graham was an African-American judge, the first one that I, really came into contact with. And just his demeanor, how he approached, he was very serious. Federal court is obviously a lot different than, what it looks like on the state court side of things. Mm-hmm. But people respected him as a jurist, his command for the law, his, words of wisdom played a significant role in helping mold and shape. At the time, like I said, I had no inkling that, being a judge was going to be in my future, but yet I was learning things from him mm-hmm. That ultimately would shape, the jurist that I have become. So Judge Donald Graham played a very significant role for me. Someone else who played a role for me, he is deceased at this point in time, but Judge Barry Logston, he was a JDR judge in the city of Newport News when I first got there. And he had, been a lawyer, was a GAL, and people talked about how passionate he was about working with children. And so he was in the perfect place because initially he was in General District Court. And, anybody that knows about judgeships knows that oftentimes if somebody starts in JDR court, a lot of times, especially if they didn't practice in the JDR court and they're not passionate about it, they are trying to move from the JDR court to get over to the General District Court. And he was the opposite. He started in General District Court and he made his way over to the JDR court because that's what he was passionate about. And Judge Logston was one of those judges that wore his emotions on his, when I say on his sleeve, I mean, he wore it on his old arm because I can remember specifically arguing one case in front of him. And I can remember, in my mind, I was having an internal conversation while I'm giving my argument to him. And I'm looking at him and his face is contorting. He's doing like this. And, he's, from his responses, it was very clear that he was not feeling my argument. So, sometimes you have to learn to just kind of shut up. And that's what I did in that situation. I said, you know what?
Read the room.
You got to read the room. He is not feeling, what I was saying. And so as a result of that, I did. I sat down. And, I don't think I won that particular case, but I learned a lesson. But one of the things I really took from him was that he would take the time, if a juvenile would do well in his court, he'd say, hey, bring your report card the next time you come. And for every A, I'll give you $10. For every B, I'll give you $5. And, he would do that on a regular basis. Now, this is not, somebody else's money that he is
no, this is out of his pocket.
This is out of his pocket.
Yeah.
And so while I didn't pick up on that, I've not gone that route.
Cost of living going up a little bit.
Right. But I'll tell you, one of the things that he would do is if a young person had done well and they had, maybe they got their GED or maybe they were successful in drug court, because we had a juvenile drug court in Newport News, he would get down off of the bench, he would come down there, and he would shake their hands. And that was something that stood out to me. And so to this very day, that is one thing I've made a point of. When a young person who's come before me, who maybe it's been a struggle and they've been trying to, do the right thing, but it's been back and forth, and maybe they've come back on probation violations, or they've had trouble going to school like they were supposed to, and they finally got that diploma or that GED, I will get down off of the bench, I will go down and I will shake their hand, or give them a hug. Yeah, and
it means a lot.
I saw that from Judge Barry Logston, and so that again, I didn't know that he was having an impact and influence on me at that time, but that's exactly where I got that from, was from Judge Logston. So shout out, to Judge Logston, who, like I said, he passed away a few years ago from cancer, but he's one of those people. I got the opportunity to meet his wife at a retirement party for the clerk down in Newport News. And so that's a nice segue to talk about Patsy Ewell. Patsy Ewell's the JDR clerk in Newport News when I was just getting started in Newport News. And when I tell you that when I left the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office and I was trying to figure out how I was going to keep my lights on and pay the bills, Patsy Ewell put me on the court-appointed list during the middle of the year. And that is unheard of, because, that's planned out for 6 months, a year, in advance. And I was able to get cases and, make sure that I was able to, keep a roof over, my head, and clothes on the back, and, feed the mouths in my household because of her generosity. But, one of the things that I will encourage lawyers, anybody who's dealing with our court system, realize and understand the judges, yeah, we got a little bit of say-so in things. But you do right by the clerk's office, they going to do right by you.
Or even better, if you do wrong by the clerk's office.
If you do wrong by the clerk's office, trust me.
And listen, doing wrong includes us.
Yes.
We can't run afoul.
No, we sure can. They have us jacked up.
Make your job really hard.
Yeah. But when I tell you that she was just such a wonderful person, and her staff there, they took care of me. And I can't tell you how many times I, maybe, was filling out a voucher trying to get paid, and I didn't put something in there, and they would hit me up, say, hey, or they would, fill in a number, the right number or something like that. But for the ones who they'd send it back.
Let the state send it back to you too. And waited a couple of months before you get the rejection. Yeah, listen, that's a whole
like today.
That's a whole nother episode we can
That's
have.
a whole nother episode.
As you phrased it, keeping the lights on and paying the bills when you start a law firm. That's a whole nother episode.
It is.
And filling out those court-appointed vouchers.
Yes, absolutely. But so shout out to Patsy, who is recently retired. She's retired in the last year or so. But she was one of those people that had a major impact on me. She wasn't a judge, she wasn't a lawyer, but she had just as much as influence on me in my legal career as anybody else. I'll mention two other people. I'll mention Judge Andrea Foster. Judge Foster was a circuit court judge in Newport News when I first started. And Judge Foster, nice, sweet woman. But I tell you what, you better be prepared. You go in front of Judge Foster. I can remember sitting down with her, like in chambers, and she would tell me, like, Brian, when you come to court, you need to be prepared. And she would tell me, she was like, look, if you look like we do, okay, there is an expectation that you need to operate in excellence. And so don't ever, try to just get by, being average, be the best. And she lived by that, because I found out, that she was married, working, had kids, and was one of, maybe a couple of black females at the college we met, the Marshall with, law school, finished first in her class with all that. So she was a major influence on my legal career. So shout out to Judge Foster. And then finally, I would be remiss if I did not mention Judge Cassandra Conyers, or she, as most folks know her better as Sandy Conyers. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do from a career standpoint. Sandy at the time was a deputy. I think she was the chief deputy in the Williamsburg, James City County Commonwealth Attorney's Office. And I was trying to figure out kind of what direction I was going to go in. And she attended my church. Her husband, I had known, he had known me for the better part of my life. And so I reached out to her just to, try to, figure out what the next move was going to be, because I wasn't having much success, on the job front. And she asked me, had I ever thought about being a prosecutor? And I was like, no, because I had no interest in being a prosecutor, because that was literally, I was in law school, that was the last thing that I could imagine myself being, was a prosecutor. And so we had that conversation, and I'll never forget, it was about a month later, I called her back because I was still striking out. I needed, I needed a job. And I was like, talk to me about this whole prosecutor thing again. So she told me, like, look, reach out to Howard Gwynn, who's Commonwealth attorney in Newport News, and see if they have any openings. At the time they did, and I got a job working there. That was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because I got so much experience very early on. As you know, there's a lot of work to go around in Newport News. So I am eternally grateful for the opportunity to practice there in Newport News. And she played a major role in me, deciding that I was going to go the route of becoming a prosecutor. And then eventually she went to the bench and she became a JDR judge in Gloucester County. And when I went to private practice, I got on her court-appointed list, and she made sure I was on her court-appointed list in each jurisdiction. And I got cases out of those jurisdictions. And eventually, it got a bit much because, as you know, Judge Bugg, when you first started off, boy, you'll take cases anywhere.
Man. Whole state and Washington, D.C.
Whole state and Washington, D.C.
The half-bar car will travel, baby.
Right. But, after I started doing it for a little while, I'm like, okay, I had to do a cost benefit analysis. Like, look, I'm not getting enough cases to continue to go out to Middlesex County. I'm not getting enough, cases to go out to Matthews. And so she understood. But I stayed on her court-appointed list in Gloucester, which was a little bit closer. And the volume was more significant there than it was in those other jurisdictions. But I ended up my career ended up mirroring her career. She had been an assistant Commonwealth attorney in Newport News, eventually left to go to Williamsburg, and I was an assistant Commonwealth attorney in Newport News. I went into private practice, but she went to the JDR bench. I followed her to the JDR bench, and we were colleagues for about a year before she retired. And in fact, when she retired, she was the chief judge here in the 9th Judicial Circuit, and I took over as chief judge for her when she retired. So she's someone who, she still comes and sits for me here in Williamsburg. She is good people. She crazy. She can tell a story. I love Judge Conyers, to life. She is just an amazing woman, amazing jurist. But just somebody that, that I care a lot about. So those are the folks who, again, disclaimer, there are other people who played a role, definitely. But those are some of the people that definitely had an impact on me and, where I am today. So.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So let's transition to our final segment, the off the record segment. And so we want to kind of stick with this theme of influencers, but let's talk about maybe an influencer or two of folks who maybe influenced you, not in one of those areas, and maybe, they might not be the traditional influencer that you might think about, or maybe they are, just in a different way. So, Judge, I'm gonna let you start off.
Yeah, I would have to say the first that I think of, man, is my, kind of culturally, I always call him my uncle, but he was a cousin. He was older than me.
Okay, so he's one of those.
He's Uncle Mike. But he's actually my cousin, Michael Brown. May he rest in peace. But my cousin, Mike, and I don't recall what year it was, and a lot of this happened when I was younger. So I'm only told certain stories. But at some point, he got into trouble and got convicted of robbing a store, I believe it was. And as I'm told, he was given, you know how it is, there's say a 20-year sentence with 15 years suspended or something to that effect. And as I'm told, he flipped over the table and tried to charge the judge in the courtroom. So he got all of his time. So I don't remember any of that part of the story. Well, my first memories of my cousin Mike or Uncle Mike, he's always been incarcerated. And it would be him writing letters home to my family. And the 80s and 90s jail photos where they got the little background and he's in the denim suit, and it kind of almost makes it look like it's not a bad place.
Not a bad place,
right? And so I remember those photos. I remember him writing, and I don't know I think it might have been my grandmother's idea that him and I kind of became like pen pals when I was younger.
Okay. All right.
And he would write me and I would write him back, and a lot of his and I didn't realize at the time. I'm young. We're talking no more than 10 when this first starts. But what I didn't realize is that he was giving me a lot of life lessons, right? In those letters on how to avoid ending up where he was and the mistakes that he made and the things I needed to look out for. Those things that we try to impart on the youth when, I know you do a lot of speaking engagements to talk to kids, and I do my fair share of, not running with particular crowds or being able to walk away in certain situations, learning how to control your temper in certain situations, not responding off of impulse and emotion, right? And he was writing me about those things. As I got older, we would start to have kind of like these family days for the different facilities he was in, because he was in different places throughout the state. And we would go visit. And, now I look back on it, it's kind of interesting, but they'd have like field day for the kids. I remember doing sack races and, the thing where you carry the egg and, all the arts and crafts. But we were just at a state correctional facility, to visit cousin Mike or Uncle Mike at the time. So it was something about that experience of, having him write me those letters, having a family member that was incarcerated for so many years, knowing him as a family member, knowing him as a good person, knowing him outside of this crime that he committed and he was convicted for. But it had a lasting impact on me to see him there, the messages, the letters he wrote me. And, it really kind of came full circle for me when, as a kid, like I said, we would go to the field days, and I remember riding up to the whatever correctional facility he was in, because, most of these correctional facilities are, just in the middle
out
of
sticks,
nowhere, way out in the sticks. So you're just driving, and the first thing you usually see is the top of the fences and the barbed wire, right, at the top. So I remember as a part of our rookie school's 2 weeks when you become a new judge, as a part of the circuit court judges rookie school, we actually tour a Department of Corrections facility. And I remember riding the bus. I think we went to, I don't remember which facility it took us to. It might have been Central State. I think it was Central State. Okay. And I remember riding on the bus with 22 other newly elected circuit court judges and the head probation officer from each of our jurisdictions. And I broke down because I saw the barbed wire. And for so much of my life, I tried to make decisions to keep myself from being behind those barbed wires again, Yeah. And it just made me think about him. It made me think, in this moment, I am on this little bus going behind these barbed wires, but I'm a newly elected circuit court judge. And I really credit my cousin Mike. For the influence that he had on me and so many of my other cousins, because sometimes you don't have to be the person to make the mistake. You can live and learn through others' mistakes. And I'm blessed, and I think we are all blessed that he did, get out and get a chance to live the rest of his life in the way he wanted to live it. Sure. He was a colorful character, man. Man, colorful dude. But just, had a lot of life lessons that he passed along. But I really credit him. And, even me going into criminal defense was because I understood that, sometimes people that are charged, a lot of times people that are charged with crime, they're good folks. They might have, done something out of necessity or had a bad moment. They're more than just perhaps that moment,
Sure.
So I really credit him that he kept me on the straight and narrow through his messages, and also really, I think, inspired my role as a criminal defense attorney. So my cousin Mike would be that unconventional influencer that, you wouldn't think that you would learn a lot from, but I learned a lot from those letters he wrote me while he was incarcerated.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
As you can tell, it still, strikes a chord with me,
man. Yeah. No, I can understand that. Yeah. So I'll give two. The first is my grandfather, Victor Linwood Hunley Sr. My grandfather, better, a lot of people knew him as Big Toe, Blondie.
Did you say Big Toe?
Big Toe. Okay. Big Toe.
Okay.
That was, one of his nicknames with the family. Mm-hmm. And so again, his name was Victor. Okay. but I think it was one of his younger siblings. It may have been my Aunt Daisy, who couldn't say Victor.
That makes sense.
Called
Someone got
Big
big
Toe.
toe. I got you.
Big Toe, and yeah, it was one of the family members. I'm almost
Yeah.
certain that it was his baby sister, but I could be wrong about that. But so he was from Southampton County, Virginia, moved to Newport News, and to the big city, and went to North Carolina A&T
Okay.
initially, got homesick after a week of being down there.
Not a
Came
week.
back a week. A week. He said, I'm going back home to Virginia.
Coming back home, baby.
Coming back home, and ended up at Hampton Institute.
Okay.
And finished his college journey there. But my grandfather was like ahead of his time. He was an entrepreneur. Many of the homes and buildings in the Southeast community, he built. He became a general contractor, and he had a hardware store. He owned the first black-owned hardware store on the peninsula back in the 1950s and 60s, right on Chestnut Avenue. He had a little diner, a little restaurant that my mom and her siblings worked in.
Okay.
When they were growing up. He was, he sat on many, boards, planning commissions, for the city. And he was a giant of a man. I always, for those of you who don't know me, I played football at the University of Michigan. I was not the biggest DB on the team. And he was, he was a big man. He, was tall in stature, and I always, wished that I got that gene from him. but he was, an impactful. I mean, when you talk about the entrepreneurship thing, he was one of those folks that played a role on me. I knew that, being in business for myself was something that I always wanted to do, and he set the example for me. And so he passed away in April of 88, I believe it was. I was 7 years old at the time. And I remember the last Christmas, him being in the hospital dealing with cancer. And, even though I didn't have, a lot of time, sometimes people grow up with their grandparents.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that experience, but even the short time that I did have with him, he played a significant role, and I learned so much about him then and since, his passing, and just people that knew him, and they find out that he's my grandfather, and like, oh my gosh, he was such a great man and did so much. If you know Otis Smith's funeral home downtown Newport News, yeah, he built the funeral home.
Okay.
So, he played a major impact on me. And on the, along that same lines, I have to, say my dad. My dad, came to Williamsburg and set up his dental practice. And I grew up in his dental practice. And so I saw, the hard work that went into, coming to a community that he wasn't from and had to build a clientele. I went to a funeral and I ran into some people. They looked at me and said, "Are you a Smalls?" I said, "As a matter of fact, I am." He's like, "Dr. Smalls, your dad?" I was like, "Yes, he is." And they had been patients of his, the Mitchells. They had been patients of his while they were living here locally. And I think they've since moved away. But I can't tell you how many times people would come up to me in the community, even to this day, they will say, "Your dad was my dentist when I was growing up." And so, he was in the back pulling teeth, and my mom was his office manager, and they did that for 36 years. And, they both had an influence on me, but, obviously my dad is my dad, and he definitely played a role in me wanting to be in business for myself. You know, at one point in time, I thought I was going to be a dentist because of him, but you know, I ended up going in a different direction. So those are two influencers that played a significant role in shaping and molding me into the man that I am today. So
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
yeah,
I love it, man.
yeah. So anything else before we?
No, listen. You know, I will say in that last one, I didn't realize we were mentioning family. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my grandmother, Pearl Stiff. You talk about somebody influence somebody. You know, my mom. I always say I was my mom's senior year gift in high school.
Yeah.
So, you know, while my mom was finishing school, my dad was just getting started working at the shipyard. You know, I lived primarily with my grandmother. My grandmother, man, kept me close to the vest, and she was greatest influence in life, man. This podcast would be another hour and a half if I talked about her, man. But I'd be remiss if I didn't miss her. God bless her. I think about her every day. Got her tattooed on my arm. But you know, early influences, and again, you know, when we're growing up, I don't even think any of our influencers knew necessarily. They were just looking out for us, right? They were setting the example, feeding love into us, and trying to show us the right way, man. And you know, especially for those of the ones that are no longer here, man. And I say it all the time, especially about my grandmother. I wish she could see me now. You know, I wish she could be here to share in this. So that's the only other thing I would add, man, in terms of, you know, influencers. But you know, I think we have an announcement, right? We got an announcement to make.
I think we do.
Yeah.
I think Judge Bugg, I'll let you lead the way.
You gonna let me make it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, listen. So this is episode 7. We are going to take a brief hiatus, or as they call it in the law, a sabbatical for the holiday season. Just kind of giving schedules and, you know, how things are going. We're going to take a break, and our plan is to come back first thing in 2026, revamped. We are going to bring to you in-person episodes where my brother and I will be recording together. We have a long list of guests that we are going to try to coordinate schedules with. We have some other creative episodes on the horizon, some interactive episodes that we've talked about, perhaps some episodes where we may be coming to a institution of higher learning near you. So we have quite a few things planned in 2026. But again, we're going to take a brief sabbatical just for the holiday season. We thank you for your support. We hope that you get a chance while we do have some time off to go back and catch up on any episode that you might have missed. Go ahead and share your favorite episode with a friend. The comments to all of our reels and stories are still open. I think we still have some top 5 debate that'll keep us going into the new year. But we are truly excited for where the podcast is going to go in the next year and beyond. And we look forward to bringing you as much content as we possibly can. So that's what we got coming up in the new year. More of us together in person, more guests. Some different types of episodes, but again, continuing to bring you everything that we possibly can about the law, life, and everything in between.
Yeah, I'm excited about this next iteration. I think there's an energy that, you know, look, I love, you know, getting on and recording with you remotely, but I just think that the energy, you know, the vibe will, you know, be that much better in person.
Yes,
you know,
indeed.
and we know how to have a good time when we get together as well. So
yeah, that's not a problem. That's not a problem.
Not at all. Not at all. So y'all thought we cut up on here when, you know, we're, I don't know, 100 and some miles away. Yeah, we really gonna have a good time when we are recording in person. Yeah. So, well, look, if this is the last time y'all hear from us in 2025, man, have a great holiday season.
Yes,
be
indeed.
safe.
Be safe. Be safe.
You know, hug on those folks that you need to hug on, love on them while you can.
Yeah.
And we're excited about 2026 and everything that it has to offer. So until then, I'm B Smalls.
And I'm D Bugg, folks. Thanks for coming out. Have a good one. Yes, indeed.
Peace.
Be safe.